Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Um, I actually want to start by asking a question because I am grateful that you're taking out time to be here today. And I would like to hear, if you would, type in the chat box what you are most interested or excited to learn about. I'm guessing it may not be how horrible stress is, but that may just be me. That's not what I'm most excited to share about. I will touch on it, but I'm looking forward to sharing with you about the other side of stress, like the new understanding scientifically about stress. And I will share from the start that I am a work in progress. I've become a stress expert because of all the stress in my own life and learning the best ways to manage it. So I will be sharing some of my hard-won knowledge. And I'm also the professor for the stress management classes at ACHS this year at least. And I am excited that I'll hopefully be teaching it again next year. So if you want to take stress management at ACHS, you might have me as your professor. And if not, you'll have someone else who's equally wonderful. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and hopefully you'll be able to see my slide here. I'm just looking down, excited, joining. Oh, I see some familiar names. The embodiment aspect, good. Me too. I'm most excited about somatic approaches and regulating the nervous system, taking advantage of our neurophysiology to change our stress response. Okay, management through essential oils. I am not an aromatherapist, but I love them. I have some diffusing in my office right now. Yeah, stress management tips. I have lots of tips, and we'll even do a couple as well. So let's go. Let's go into it. Let me start the slideshow. So the name of the talk today is Embodied Wellness, a roadmap from stressed out to stress resilient. And this is part one. I want to also have a shout out for Lisa Warman, another ACHS professor. She will be leading part two, talking about somatic approaches for befriending stress. You really don't want to miss that part. I was a little jealous because that is also my favorite part. But I feel like I am the ideal person to talk to you about the roadmap of befriending stress, and then you'll get more motivated to start practicing. So here's a little about me, very briefly. I am a naturopathic physician, and I've been an educator as well for 20 years. And I will say that's my favorite part of being a doctor. In naturopathic medicine, we have a principle called docere, which is doctor as teacher. And I feel like that has become really, for me, the heart of medicine is sharing skills and information so that my patients and my students feel empowered to take their own health into their hands and feel better. So that's my training background. I've also been a single parent now for almost 10 years. My son is 9.5, and I'm a dog mom as well. So I definitely have a lot of empathy for others who are in the single parent role. It's a lot. It's a lot. Being a parent in general is a lot. But I just want to say, like, as far as like the stress management skills go, I have really upped my game in this last decade. I've also been a recovering sugar addict for 4 years and counting. And I feel like that was significant enough for me to share right off the bat because I was a naturopathic doctor for 20 years and I struggled with emotional eating. And it wasn't until I really got serious about healthy aging and wanting, I'm an older mom. I had my son at 42 and wanting to make sure that I'm still around and healthy as he gets to be a young adult was part of my motivation to take an abstinence approach with sugar, because moderation and intuitive eating, as much as I wanted them to work, they just weren't working for me. I had already stopped alcohol and, been sober for over a decade almost at that point. So when I stopped the sugar, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do this for the rest of my life, but I'm going to try it. And I can say, for some of us, doing things like that one day at a time is the way to go. And that's how I've approached stress maintenance. Stress management and stress maintenance is I take it one day at a time. When things feel so big, just have to break it down and say, I don't know about next week or next year, but just for today, I can do this. So that's my first kind of stress management tip as you get to know me is I am not the expert at almost anything, but I am authentic and I am a work in progress. When it comes to public speaking, I'm really nervous. Putting together this talk, ironically, was nerve-wracking for me, but I have become so good at stress management. And part of it was giving up my food as my way of coping with stress. I had to learn other ways, healthier ways to cope with stress. So we're talking a little about the actual stress response, the neurobiology of the process of stress in our body, and actually what is stress. Then we'll look at the nervous system and how it regulates itself and how we also co-regulate, and looking at neuroplasticity, one of my favorite things to talk about, neuroplasticity. So that's where the hope comes in, like rewiring for healing and resilience. And then finally, a little bit on holistic stress management. So using all of our resources, and there are so many inner resources, and then also the different things that we have here at ACHS to learn and use and practice and teach. So I'm excited. And I heard this quote. This actually was published in 2018. Imagine, like, this was before COVID. Stress was declared the health epidemic of the 21st century in 2019. And then we went into a global pandemic and everything was intensified. That we live in such intense times. You could say it's like an upside down world almost, with all of the things that we're facing individually and collectively. So for me, it's like the most important pillar of health is for us to learn how to thrive in the face of this. So first is to define stress. I'm curious if you want to type it in the chat box, what's your definition of stress? And then we'll get on to what some of the experts say. But before we move into that, I will say I am not going to be sharing the epidemiology on stress-related disease, on the mental health crises of anxiety and depression. I'll just let you know it's bad. We know that. So we can just leave that there and then move into the biology and the physiology and the hope. But first, I would like to invite you to breathe with me for just a moment. I always like to start the stress management classes with some kind of breath or experiential exercise too. So please put your feet on the floor and rest your hands on your lap and take a nice deep breath in through your nose if you can. And then slowly let it out through your mouth. And repeat that a couple more times. I want you to bring your attention and your awareness into your body. Find your feet if you can. So bring your awareness into your body. Feel yourself in your body and bring your attention down to your feet or down to your seat. That is just a quick grounding exercise that I learned from a coach that I love, Everett Constantine. He does internal family systems. He calls it BFF. So that when you're stressed and you can't remember like what to do, it's like your best friend forever, but it's breathe, feel your body, find your feet. So let's go into what is stress. And kind of thinking about the nuance of what is anxiety versus stress, there's really a big overlap. So the World Health Organization defines stress as a state of worry or mental tension caused by a difficult situation. Stress is a natural human response that prompts us to address challenges and threats in our lives. And the American Psychological Association, APA, says the physiological or psychological response to internal or external stressors. Stress involves changes to affecting nearly every system of the body, influencing how people feel and behave. It's almost hard to define stress without using the word stressors or stress. Interestingly, on the APA website, I was kind of surprised to see that. And then Hans Selye, who is a endocrinologist, a physician who studied what happens to the body under pressure, and kind of came up with the idea of the stress theory, called it the non-specific response of the body to any demand placed upon it to adapt. So you look at his definition, whether it's something good or something bad, it creates a physiological response of arousal that's very similar. So rather than thinking of stress as good or bad, I invite you to start to look at the fact that it's like excitement. It's like arousal that revs us up. I'm going to take a look at the definitions that you all shared. Yeah, there will be more breath work coming up today and then definitely on Thursday as well. And Carissa's here. My definition of stress is the reaction we take into our bodies, both physically and mentally, that overstimulates our nervous system, which causes distress. Yeah, so looking at what is distress, let's go ahead and take a look. The next slide. In the C-word text on managing stress that we use for our stress management class, he came up with this updated definition that was sort of a collaborative effort among several experts, and that is that stress is the inability to cope with a perceived threat, real or imagined, to one's mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being, which results in a series of physiological responses and adaptations. And you might recognize this character. If you haven't seen Inside Out, I recommend the movie. It's a kid's movie, but it's so helpful for anyone who wants a better understanding of how the systems work, inside especially the different parts inside of us. And so this character was introduced in the second movie, and she is basically stress. She is anxiety. So is stress bad for us? That is a good question. And there are different kinds of stress. We go into more depth in the stress management class, but it kind of depends. It depends on whether or not it's a short burst or if it's something that's going on, like a long, chronic kind of stress. Is it a eustress or a distress? With eustress, it may be that you're preparing your thesis, getting married, or moving to the house of your dreams. I think it's still a lot. The excitement is still arousal and puts stress on the different body systems. But assuming that it's a short-lived thing and it's also, bringing excitement in a positive way, then it's definitely not a distress, which is more of like the typical thing we associate with stress of ongoing, like exhaustion. And so event versus ongoing stressors, that's a distinction as well. When there's something that's short-lived, it's sort of the classic, you may have heard of the, saber-toothed tiger chasing the caveman, and then, the nervous system kicks into sympathetic mode, fight or flight, and sends lots of, the stress chemicals, adrenaline, cortisol, to the muscles so that the person can deal with the situation. So that is what we are evolutionarily adapted for. And the challenge is in our modern lives that these, perceived threats are going on pretty much daily, ongoing, in some cases with stressful jobs, stressful relationships, stressful ongoing situations, financial situations, health situations, and that doesn't allow our body to heal when we have a perceived sense of threat and distress going on for a prolonged period of time. And we'll get into how to manage the stress and how to hopefully find ways to thrive in the face of stress. In some cases, you have to also just be discerning about what things to cut out and, up your time management. That's one of the essential stress management tools. But the other side of it is it's our response to things that are happening that matters the most. And so when we can change how we respond and we stop making mountains out of molehills, so to speak, then we can sometimes do just fine and become resilient in the face of stressors that would have before crushed us. So it's about becoming, stress ninjas in a way. Also, if you haven't seen Callie McGonigal, she's a psychologist, on this TED Talk on how to make stress your friend. This was part of the inspiration for the title of our talk, or the second talk. And in this, she explains how the people who believed that stress was going to kill them, or it was a bad thing, really experienced the negative effects of it more than people who felt capable of handling the stressors in their life. Those people tended to thrive in the face of stress. So on one front, it matters a lot what we believe about stress, and then on another, how we manage it. So I'm here to share some of my tips on that. There's an undeniable connection between stress and disease. Just recently, I've heard twice about something called the cell danger response. And for me, it's helping me connect the dots between stress and disease. I didn't include this research in my slides because I just ran across it this week. But basically, it's saying that when we have gotten in a stress mode and gotten sort of stuck there, our body is sort of in that hyperarousal state, then even at the cellular level, we're not functioning properly. And that until we're able to regulate our nervous system and have sort of a relaxation response take over, our body's not able to do all the things it needs to do in order to heal, and in order to take in nutrients, in order to produce ATP, in order to heal, heal from injuries, etc. I have seen this as a doctor, that people with chronic, complex, especially health issues, have a hard time, no matter what modality, whether it's conventional medicine or natural medicine. They have sort of like a plateau where they don't easily, get past it and finally fully heal, unless and until they're able to also heal the energy systems of the body and the stress response part of the body. We won't be getting into trauma today, but there's definitely a connection with our understanding of trauma from childhood and also just throughout life, and how when we are stuck in a trauma response, our body is not able to heal. And so that, I think, is really the connection between stress and disease in a nutshell, for both physical health issues and then also mental health. There's just more and more anxiety and depression. And on one level, I think it's a kind of a normal response to a really crazy world for us to not be adapted. I read that 1 in 6 people are on an antidepressant. It's adults, I think, in the United States. It's sort of, a wake-up call for us to say, okay, this probably isn't going to get better anytime soon. So what do we do about it in the meantime? And I would say we can learn to optimize our response, our neurophysiology. to develop resilience and tolerance of uncertainty. That was a term I ran across in the literature over and over, which is what healthy, happy people have. Like looking at positive psychology, which is a fun thing to do, looking at the traits and beliefs of people who are flourishing, who are thriving. And one of the characteristics that they have in common in general is they have a fairly big tolerance to uncertainty. Whereas for those who are in the stress, trauma response kind of state, they're more contracted and they need to like control things that are outside of their tolerance, because anything that is outside of their comfort zone can actually just like make their health situation worse, and more. So it's not to say it's all in your head, but rather to say if there's a stress response that's sort of like on overdrive chronically, and a really helpful step in healing is, and healing the physical body as well, is learning how to integrate and process that stress and become more resilient to it so that we're able to tolerate uncertainty. There's no escaping the uncertainties in our world. So stress response 101 is that it's a survival mechanism orchestrated by our nervous system, our autonomic nervous system. And you may have heard there's like two main branches, the sympathetic and parasympathetic parts of the nervous system. So in the sympathetic side, there's this fight or flight response that starts in the hypothalamus, the HPA axis. It goes from the hypothalamus producing ACTH to the pituitary, which produces adrenaline. Just getting involved there, but the hypothalamus sends the message to the pituitary, which sends the message to the adrenals to produce adrenaline and ramp up the stress response. So this is the classic, the way we survived, the way our ancestors made it through evolutionarily. The fact that our ancestors were able to do this helped keep our species alive. So it's not a bad thing. The other side of the nervous system is the parasympathetic, and you may have heard it called the rest and digest part of the nervous system. These two sides of the nervous system counterbalance each other, and we want to support the parasympathetic side. In general, this is what we need more of in our lives. And they both can't be happening at the same time, although there are some states that are sort of blended, like the frozen state, the freeze state. We'll get to that. But the parasympathetic system also evolutionarily was responsible for other things. So let's look at those going forward here. Once it's initiated, the stress response is largely beyond conscious control. At least that's what we'd always thought. So even when I was in medical school, I think that was kind of like what we were taught, is we just have to reduce stress to help people, because once the body goes into this fight or flight mode, the cortisol and the adrenaline come on board, and their blood pressure is going to go up, and they're going to have, liver congestion, and they're going to have digestive issues, etc. The next part of the story, though, is more hopeful. And also we're revising even that part one on the fact that there are some things that are in our conscious control. So Andrew Huberman and his colleagues have been doing research on the stress response and looking at the role of the brain stem and nervous system arousal. So again, back to that definition of stress as arousal. And he has done research that shows that we can have a pretty big effect on our stress response with conscious breath. So it's the one system in the body that is both voluntary and also beyond voluntary. So when we're not paying attention to it, our breath is happening. However, we can also harness the breath and consciously choose a type of breath that will give our nervous system signal. And we'll get a chance to really practice that with Lisa in part 2. But for now, I just wanted to mention this one particular type of breath that Dr. Huberman has researched and published on, called the physiologic sigh. So it's one way to regulate our arousal state. So this is a research publication where they were looking at different types of breathing, comparing the benefits on the stress markers. They were comparing box breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, and cyclic hyperventilation, which is sort of like the Wim Hof styles, hyperventilating. And in this case, the physiologic sigh, which I've explained here, is something that the body does on its own when there's an imbalance between oxygen and carbon dioxide. So we breathe in oxygen-rich air, and then we breathe out air that has more carbon dioxide. When we're stressed, that balance gets off, and we sometimes just catch our breath without even noticing we're doing it or meaning to. Well, it turns out we can do this whenever we want, and especially if we notice that we're stressed out, it's a good time to do it. So the way it works, I invite you to do this along with me, is to take a breath in through your nose fully, and then take a second deeper sip of air in to fully expand your lungs. As long as it feels comfortable. And then slowly exhale through your mouth until all the air is gone. I invite you to do another round or two. I get in the habit of blowing out almost as if blowing out through a straw. That's not an official part of this breath, but you can play with it. If that feels good, you can do that too. And I will make sure that you all get a copy of the slides in case you want to read the reports and things that I've shared on each one. Interested to hear in the chat if you have any observations from these. So many good comments. I hope I get a chance to read them all later. But trying to keep it a little bit concise because there's so much I want to share, and I think the best is yet to come. So on the neurobiology and neurophysiology of stress, my main message to you is that we are adapted for survival. That's how we're wired, but we're maladapted for the chronic stress of our current times of the 21st century. And with our updated understanding of stress, we can exercise more conscious control over our state of arousal, our physiology, to change our experience of stress. So really, a lot of it comes down to hacks for the nervous system. And these are the things I feel like have been saving my life as a mom, especially like going through the toddler years and then the different points with my son. Like I had to learn ways to regulate my own nervous system so that I could provide a co-regulating kind of calm presence for him. That's one of the wonderful things about being a parent in our modern times, is that there's so much information and so many resources for parents that our parents and grandparents didn't have. And thank goodness, because they needed it. We all need it. And so hopefully our kids will have the benefit of this. They're growing up learning how it feels to be calm, how to regulate their nervous system. And yeah, rewiring for healing and resilience. So if we did have some, maladapted stress responses built in from our childhood or our lifetime, it's not too late. It's not too late to learn new ways. So this is my favorite stuff. And I saw this quote and I loved it. This is paraphrased, but from Eleanor Roosevelt. She shared, "People are like tea bags. You can't tell how strong they are until you put them in hot water." Kind of another version of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It's a consciously chosen belief on my part to gravitate towards these kinds of beliefs, because the opposite is depressing, to think, oh my gosh, all of this stress I've been through is just setting me up for cancer, disease, dementia. I'm going to die early. No, not at all. All of this stress has shown me that I have like a deep resilience that I can count on, and all of these tools that I'm now capable of using so that I can live a life that's more fulfilling than ever, thanks to the challenges. So in our understanding of the autonomic nervous system, I mentioned the fight or flight response of the sympathetic nervous system. That was like the survival, run or fight response. And then also the parasympathetic, which is sort of illustrated here, is important when we're not in that arousal state of fight or flight. We tend to be in the rest and digest mode. That is my little guard dog. Mimi, it's okay. Okay, so it turns out that the parasympathetic system has another set of roles as well. And it's not all rosy. Lisa will go into the reptilian brain, the mammalian brain, and the neocortex more on her part of the talk. But I will just share, like, evolutionarily, we are animals, we are mammals, and we can play possum. That is partly what the parasympathetic mode does when there is a life-threatening sort of situation, or we perceive that there is. We can just completely shut down. That is something that the parasympathetic nervous system does. Animals, including possums, have used this since the beginning as well. And it's something that our species also continues to do, except in humans, sometimes it looks more like collapse, like dissociation, like chronic fatigue. So I want to highlight the work of Stephen Porges. Dr. Porges coined the term polyvagal theory in 1994. And it explains, it's still a theory, but there's more and more evidence supporting it. It explains the nuanced ways that the autonomic nervous system has kept us alive and, helped us face stresses of different kind. And especially the vagus nerve. In the polyvagal theory, it shows that there's more than one role for the vagus nerve. There's two main parts. The ventral vagal that runs along the front of the body is responsible for the safety mechanism, and we'll be looking a little bit more at that. But the rest and digest and connection parts of the parasympathetic. But then there's also the dorsal vagal part of the system, and that is the part that just shuts us down when there's a major threat of some kind or perceived threat. And with this, there's a lot that's happening that is kind of beyond our conscious control. We have a built-in surveillance system. According to Porges, it's sort of like perception. He calls it neuroception. Our nervous system is constantly like reading the environment and determining whether there's any threats around. That's just how we stayed alive. It's like a built-in negativity bias that we are hardwired to be vigilant for threat. in our environment. So when neuroception is faulty, sometimes there's survival responses that are triggered when they're not really necessary. So this is where the perceived threat issue comes in. If someone has experienced adversity, trauma in their life, they may have more heightened vigilance. They may be more wired to see threats even where they don't exist. So the polyvagal theory goes into the different responses of the nervous system, and that the dorsal vagal that I mentioned is the immobilization or collapse response. And that's when we have perceived, even beyond our conscious control, some kind of life-threatening danger. And we feel overwhelmed or powerless. And you can see on this chart that someone created from Dr. Porges's polyvagal theory information that in health terms, this is associated with a lot of like helplessness, hopelessness, depression, but also with physical collapse kind of situations, thinking about like complex chronic health issues. Sometimes people have kind of gotten to the point in their journey where they're just shut down in exhaustion. And there's like this conservation of energy happening. Think about the cell danger theory. I have worked with so many beautiful souls over the years whose bodies have just like gotten to this chronic place. And it may have a name like Lyme disease, mold allergies, Epstein-Barr. There's tons of different things that can, build, this chronic kind of shutdown response. But basically is that the nervous system doesn't have the resources in order to come back from it. It's not absorbing the nutrients. It's not feeling safe enough to heal. This other state, the second kind of maladaptive state or survival state is mobilization. That's this yellow sympathetic mode, fight or flight. And of course, we need this. So we go through stresses in our life and we hopefully come through them and back into the third response, which is where we want to spend most of our time, the social engagement response. That's activated when we feel safe and connected to others. This is known as the ventral vagal pathway in polyvagal. And I think this is what makes us special as a species. We have this capacity to say so much just with our facial expressions. We can communicate to one another a sense of safety. And so as helpers, healthcare, coaches and practitioners, it's one of the things that we can work on and then share with others is this self-regulation and providing a calm presence so that someone else who is stressed out about their disease or about their life can feel what it's like to be calm and kind of co-regulate with us. That's part of our nervous system capacity, is this ability to attune with others. There's so much on this. It's really exciting. HeartMath is one of the resources that I've read about, like looking at the way people entrain their nervous system responses are very much interdependent on each other. You probably notice, the difference when you are close up in contact with someone who's really stressed out versus someone who's very calm. And so yeah, it behooves us for our own health and happiness, but then also in the work we do with others to do the practices that it requires for us to have that consistent staying in the green zone of being present and socially engaged. This is where we also can feel compassion and grounded. Okay, so with the polyvagal theory, it's explained that humans have the ability to co-regulate. We can send signals of safety or danger to one another. In this Venn diagram, you can see the the different states in another way. So the green one is at the top, the relaxed ventral vagal pathway is characterized by normal heart rate and muscle tone. And this is where we feel relaxed, engaged, curious, like available, connecting with other people. The mobilized state is that sympathetic mode where we are, revved up and aroused, hyper aroused to deal with whatever needs to be dealt with. In some cases, it's something positive, but a lot of times it's distress. Maybe it's like we're late for an appointment and we're in traffic. If we catch ourselves in a situation where we're responding more than we need to, the really cool thing about the polyvagal theory and tools is that we can learn ways, breath and other ways, to help move ourselves from one state to another. Maybe we need more energy. So we can do things that help move us, like dancing and playing, etc. But if we're, in the third state, which is the shutdown, immobilized state with low heart rate, low energy, we may need to find ways to get more connected. We might find more ways to get more mobilized, but basically it's like finding where we spend most of the time on the map may help us figure out which are the things that are going to help us, what are the modalities and practices that are going to help us most. So neural pathways in the brainstem calm our reaction to threat while simultaneously enabling facial expression, head movements, and vocal intonations that let others know we are open to friendly communication. So yeah, that's sort of the mirror neurons. We communicate a lot with our facial expression, with our posture, with our tone, and we can practice co-regulating with kids is a great place to do it. The other thing I wanted to share here, I'm going back even to the last slide, is with the ventral vagal system, when it is the state where we're spending most of our time, it would make sense that we're able to digest our food well. That's, it's the part of the vagus nerve that's going to the intestines, and it's responsible for us to be able to do all the actions of absorbing and digesting our nutrients. So if we're in fight or flight mode, in sympathetic mode or the dorsal vagal mode in an ongoing or repeated way, it may affect our digestion. And that in turn affects everything. Because if we're not able to take in our nutrients, then we don't have, what we need in order to fuel our energy systems and to give us all the micronutrients and macronutrients we need to do the healing of our body. So that's one of the reasons why it's so important, no matter what someone's health issue is, to support the nervous system and regulate the nervous system. So with something like irritable bowel syndrome, especially like thinking about, okay, how do we help reset the nervous system as part of the approach? As a naturopath, I love this because I think of food as the first medicine, but it's right along with learning to regulate the nervous system and breathe. There's so many comments. I wish I had time for all of them. Oh, yeah. Co-regulation is one of the reasons I love practicing yoga in groups. Me too. I miss that. As a mom, a single mom, I have been doing yoga home alone for the last few years. And that's good, it has its benefits too, but definitely doing things like yoga and meditation, Tai Chi, nature connection as a group is extra special because then we get the social engagement benefit along with the movement and the other good stuff. So I have been a bit of a trauma junkie the last couple of years. I've been taking a lot of courses with the experts with NICAB, the National Institute for the Clinical Application of Behavioral Medicine, because I find it so compelling Dr. Stephen Porges is in there, and Stephen Levine, Dan Siegel, these experts who are showing the problem with our stress response and trauma to our health, but then also the possibilities and the promise of how we don't have to be stuck there. Someone doesn't, have to feel like they're going to have post-traumatic stress symptoms that are going to, keep them from going out and living a full life forever. The truth is, we can heal. So if someone has, been through a lot of stress and trauma, they may have a small window of tolerance. And the ideal would be to work on expanding it so that we can deal with whatever's happening in our life. So stress doesn't feel like necessarily a bad thing. It may feel like an opportunity and excitement to take on things that are maybe just beyond our comfort zone. So working with someone who's trained in trauma-informed care and stress is a really good way to go. I'll make a plug for Timely Care for ACHS students and staff and faculty. We have this great resource to be able to call anytime and make appointments to work with someone even in an ongoing way with coaches and counselors. So take advantage of that if you haven't already. If you don't have someone that you're working with, it's included. We get it as a plus for just being part of ACHS. One of the things I love about ACHS. So as explained by Dan Siegel, a psychiatrist, when a person is operating within their window of tolerance, they can effectively cope with their emotions. So that's the optimal place to be, is in our window of tolerance. Kids provide a classic example, like small kids, they haven't quite learned how to manage their emotions yet. And when they get thrown out of their window of tolerance, you can see it. They sometimes will just like throw tantrums, fall to the ground, scream, cry. On one hand, I admire it because it's like, okay, they're really expressing their feelings. They're not repressing them. They're like moving through these feelings. And sure enough, like most animals, they will come out the other side feeling better. Whereas if we're, stuck in panic mode, but not showing it, it does more damage. We kind of like get like this ongoing sequela or frozenness. Dan Siegel has come up with all kinds of cool strategies for parents and for people in general to learn how to expand their window of tolerance. And one of the big ones that he has gone on to promote is meditation. We will write that. But so when someone has been through trauma or they're in like a state of chronic anxiety, their perceived window of tolerance may shrink and may get pushed out of it easily. Even minor stressors can lead to feeling hyper aroused or hypo aroused. But the good news is, even if that is you, there's hope because of plasticity. Neuroplasticity or brain plasticity is the ability of our neural networks to change, grow, and reorganize. This is something else that's come, I think, really in this century, an understanding of the nervous system's ability to heal and, to find new habits even. I think that for me, the stress management part of this is like, even if we've had maladapted ways of dealing with stress, it's not too late because we can set down new neural pathways and find new ways of dealing with stress. So like in my case, instead of eating ice cream or cheesecake, it was like looking at, okay, what do I really need right now? How do I create the conditions that will help me feel calm without resorting to foods that are just going to give me a quick dopamine rush? So Brian Luke Seward, the author of the Managing Stress text, kind of explained neuroplasticity this way. It doesn't necessarily mean good changes. He explained that these changes can occur through a host of mental exercises. from meditation, where the brain becomes wired for relaxation, to doom scrolling, where the brain becomes wired for stress. So this is the key. We kind of do an inventory if we're feeling stressed and look at, how am I spending my time? Am I doom scrolling, like looking at news and things that just upsets me? That may be the first place to start. Like, how do I, create a different activity when I would normally just be looking at the, social media? That's really not what I want to be doing. Like actively choose something else that will help us feel good. And creating new habits, the brain can rewire itself, but we have to practice. At first, it takes willpower. It takes effort at first, but then eventually, these new habits become the new norm. That's the exciting part. Neurons that fire together, wire together. Dan Siegel is famous for saying that, but it turns out I found on the web that it came from another expert named Donald Hebb. So looking at, when we create new habits, we're kind of like rewiring the neural pathways. And just like going down a mountain skiing, the easiest path is the one that's already made, and we can just keep going down that same path over and over. However, when we realize that we want to go down a different path, we have to make a choice. And the first time or several times, it may feel scary. It may feel hard. It may take some more effort. But over time, these can help, rewire the brain to challenging situations and help foster emotional resilience. When I was reading about where the term neuroplasticity was first used, they were looking at the brains of meditators, like serious monk, Buddhist, professional meditators, and which areas of the brain were most active, which areas of the brain were growing or bigger, how were their brains different than other people's brains. And it wasn't because of their genetics. It was because of their practice. It was because they were actually choosing to focus their attention on the present and on, compassion and on gratitude and on, on the good stuff, that the areas of the brain that are associated with calm became the ones that were the most lit up. And the opposite is true too. If we spend most of our time in survival mode, it's natural that that's what's going to be the easiest for our brain. And in some of our cases, we may have kind of gotten addicted to excitement. That's what we run on, is the cortisol rush. We have to give ourselves this procrastination, perfectionism kind of push in order to get anything done. But it doesn't have to be that way. There's hope for us. And I count myself in that group of cultivating and using the resources. So everyone's experiences of stress and anxiety vary, but it's universal that we all have them. And just looking at what is it like to be stuck in stressed out mode? What if you aren't even sure what stress resilience looks like? Well, the roadmap from stressed out to stress resilience starts with embracing imperfection. And I chose this picture of a style of pottery from Japan called kintsugi that actually incorporates ceramic pieces that have been broken and then glued back together. And part of their beauty is seeing where the breaks were and now how they've been put back together. I just want to share for a moment a little passion for anyone who's here today because they're at that place of being at the stressed out, not even sure what to do next kind of mode, as a student, as a parent, as a business person. it's overwhelming sometimes, the pressures and the responsibilities that we are taking on, whether we choose them or not. And so just for right now, and just give yourself the grace of saying, I chose to come to this talk. And that is, that is something to be grateful for, that I'm taking a moment at least just to like give myself some compassion and maybe some tools to have hope. I think that is an important element, is having some hope. In my own journey with sugar, I had stopped quitting sugar because I had felt sort of demoralized at my failure at it. I had literally, as a young person, been aware that sugar wasn't good for me, and I had quit eating sugar, and I had been off and on the sugar wagon so many times that when I, was a doctor and counseling other people about their diet, I didn't even want to try giving up sugar because I was just like, oh, it's just so depressing when I fail at it again. So yeah, in my case, it's been really exciting for me to be able to watch myself becoming a person who makes the healthy choices that I want for my patients and for, people that I love, beginning to treat myself as, as I would want my dearest friend or my mother to be treated. And I think, that is in large part to these tools that I have learned. I didn't know I was muted. I don't know how long I was muted there, but thank you. So among the people who have inspired me are Kristen Neff and Brene Brown. I will just make a quick shout out to both of them and recommend anything that they have written and put out to those of you who may be sort of at this place where you're critical of yourself. Finding self-compassion is sort of the doorway to making the positive changes and valuing the, self-care and making healthy choices. Doing it from a place of being a critic, it usually, it doesn't work for long. And it also is just not very much fun. However, with the reckoning that Brene Brown talks about, of like admitting where we're at in our journey, looking at our failures and loving ourselves anyway, even in our imperfection. And then, learning from our foibles and our challenges. That I feel like has been so helpful for me to just like have this earned self-respect from saying, okay, I've gotten here the hard way, but I'm finally at a place where I am getting up early and meditating and doing the yoga and eating the healthy food. And it wasn't because I knew I should, because that wasn't really enough of a motivator, but it was like, oh, this is the only thing that's going to help me stay sane and feel like, the healthy, happy person that I want to be, to model for my students and my son. So loving ourselves through our hardest time is a way to forge the life that maybe we didn't think we wanted, but it's the life that we have, and that is our path to contributing in the world, to like think about the spiritual health, like what gives us meaning, what is it that we want to contribute. We have to find what is meaningful to us and then share it. It doesn't have to be original. Like in my case, I know this is like basic stuff, but I feel like it's like stuff that is so important and that can't be heard enough. And to like give you the validation, all of you, to like give yourself time to sleep, as much as your body needs, and then get the nourishment that your body needs. Just the basics for your animal body are the place to start. Okay, and also just acknowledging. So what's stressful for one person may not be for another. Part of that is that window of tolerance. So people who are very resilient have a big window of tolerance. They can handle maybe a lot more stress than others. But there's also just our background, our lived experience that will make us comfortable with something that may be stressful to someone else. I think about nature. There are people who grew up in cities with parents who didn't really go to, the woods. And so for them, it may feel intimidating to go into the deep forest and to go camping. Whereas for someone else who didn't have any other choice but to grow up in survival mode, foraging and living in the woods, that doesn't feel scary at all. So make time for exploring what feels good to you, and also cultivating habits that are, taking advantage of your own inner resources, things that already feel familiar to you. So, and, in some people's cases, they may like writing. So journaling would be an ideal practice. There are various coping strategies and relaxation techniques, lots of free classes out there, also ACHS classes out there. If you want to learn more, you can always gift yourself a class and or get additional support through a professional if you need it. So this next slide is a list of just some of the habits and resources that I could think of that have helped me and that I've seen help other people. So starting with just kind of like the basics for our bodies, and mind, getting enough rest and water, the breath work. There's so much out there on YouTube, doing the box breath, doing that physiologic sigh. There's going to be more in part 2 with Lisa, so stay tuned. But taking advantage of our ability to calm our state, our nervous system response through our breath is huge. Put it right up at the beginning. Remembering that we are animals. We need nature and other people and connection. Pets count too. I'm a big fan of cuddling with my dog when I'm feeling stressed. Having a colorful diet. There's not one perfect diet, but definitely whole foods and steering clear as much as possible. Processed foods, hyper processed foods, they're not good for anybody, and they're highly addictive. They hijack our reward centers and make us sometimes just end up eating more of them than we need. Whereas the vegetables and colorful polyphenol containing foods, they feed the good gut bugs in our microbiome, which are so important for the gut-brain connection and feeling happy. So much. I could talk for a whole hour or more about just the food part, but for the sake of time, I've been talking for quite a while. I will just move on and say there's a ton of resources for the body, for connection, also for the mind, time management and goal setting, things that do help push us out of our comfort zone. If we're in a fairly strong place, we can also take advantage of hormetic stress, sort of like the like ice baths and holding our breath, like Wim Hof style breathing. The Iceman also talks about like holding the breath for a long time to sort of like put us into a stress mode, but it can help the body thrive if we're in a state of kind of like balance to begin with. I don't recommend those for people who are already depleted. First, you want to nourish and restore. But once you do, if you're like looking to like push yourself, then doing things like intermittent fasting and ice baths and more strenuous exercise, they're great ways to push the nervous system into more resilience. Gentle exercise like yoga and moving meditation, and then playful stuff, creativity and journaling and dancing. Those are also good places to start. If you're drawn to more like the creative expression, even cooking or making nature art, Those are fun. And if there is more significant trauma and or like ongoing anxiety and maybe you're on medication and you need professional support, find someone who has experience like helping people heal their nervous system, getting off of medications if necessary. I've found internal family systems, IFS work, to be incredibly powerful to like work with the different parts that kind of evolved within that are, maybe not so helpful nowadays, but they're still like doing their best. Dick Schwartz is the founder of Internal Family Systems, and he's written several books. So the latest is called There Are No Bad Parts, just no bad parts. And there's so much to be said for that when we can kind of have a friendly relationship, even with the rebel and the critic and the different parts inside of us who are doing their best, even when it doesn't feel like a welcome guest. It could be really helpful. You can get them on board. So the ability to bounce back or bounce forward, sort of a quick definition of resilience. So it's like the goal. How do we expand our tolerance for uncertainty and stress? It first means restoring and nourishing our nervous system if we've already been depleted. But you'll know you're moving towards resilience when you feel more curiosity and confidence and flexibility. When we're, get into that like growth mindset where you're wanting to make goals and, achieve things. That's a good sign. And then just a little plug for naturopathic medicine, which is my formation. We have at the heart of it the Vis Medicatrix Naturae, which is Latin for the healing power of nature. And for me, this is important for two different reasons. First of all, we are nature. We're part of nature. And so just like any other thing in nature, we have these built-in healing mechanisms. We give our body what it needs. It will heal itself. That's just our nature. And then the other part of the healing power of nature is because we are animals, we are evolutionarily designed to be in the outdoors and be connected to nature. That helps to restore our nervous system. It may not be something that you've spent a lot of time doing, and if that's the case, you might want to like start slow or start with like house plants or something. But I really want to make a plug for like standing barefoot on the ground, for breathing in the negative ions in the forest and near waterfalls and connecting with water. It just like grounds us electrically and in our nervous system. So we can transform our stress into resilience and well-being. And then to end this self-hug is something that I learned from Peter Levine of somatic experiencing. And my reason for sharing it is to just like end with self-compassion. So it helps us feel our kind of our boundaries and stay contained. So take your right hand and put it under your left arm. If you're wearing a bra, if you happen to wear a bra, kind of right where the bra goes. And if not wearing a bra, like imagine where a bra would go, and put your hand there. And then take your left hand and just hug the other arm, the right arm, the upper arm. And take a moment to close your eyes or gaze gently down and just give yourself a nice firm squeeze. Exhale. Take all this goodness in and realize this can be part of self-soothing when you need it. If you have the privilege of having someone else in your life that you can hug, you can also ask them for a hug, offer them a hug multiple times a day. It's a way to get the benefit of our nervous system need for connection and soothing. So part of a calming self-care routine. And apparently I found a psychologist who shared that it was actually from Japan, and it was Jin Shin Jutsu, and Dr. Levine sort of borrowed it from there. I hadn't heard that before until I was researching for this talk. So please share your questions. I haven't been looking at the chat. That's sort of the end. By the way, I live in Mexico. I hope my audio and everything cooperated, other than the time I muted myself. And I have a vacation rental down here. I love having visitors, and just want to put a shout out. The Cenote Negro in Mexico, in southern Yucatan, Mexico is where I live. And so I always welcome people, and including like yoga teachers and stress management kind of leaders among our audience. If you have an idea for a small retreat or something that you would like to do, I am excited to be holding space for things like that going forward. So keep in mind or be in touch. Also, if you have any questions or things that come up, I'm happy. Stay tuned for part 2 of the Stress Support and Wellness series. Professor Lisa Warman will be talking about somatic approaches for befriending stress, learning practical tools to manage stress, boost relaxation, and restore balance in your life. And I asked her what to share. She mentioned to suggest that you dress comfortably, ready for some breath work practice and simple yoga postures. So if you haven't registered yet, you can do so. I'm sure Gina can help if you need the link for that. And then consider taking the stress management class at ACHS. The undergraduate class is HED 303, and the graduate class is HED 503 to learn more about managing stress holistically. You can contact a student advisor or admissions to get signed up. Okay, I guess I should look at questions. We need another class for the doctoral program. I know. Yeah, there's an elective in the doctoral program that is on nutrition and mental health. I have been asking Dr. Ludwig if I can teach that one. I feel like it's right up my alley. Part of my process of becoming a stress management ninja has been learning about mastering brain chemistry with food. So the PDF and follow-up email will have the link for part 2. Okay, great. Oh, Carrie Ann, I didn't know you were here. Time to be here too. Thank you. I hope to get to see you in another class. Okay, if there are any other questions that I haven't addressed, maybe speak up now or follow up with me later. Sandra was here too. Thank you all for being here. I hope to have another class with you too, Carissa, and all of you. You all are the light of my life. I love my students. The other Dr. J is here. I called myself Dr. J until I saw that you're Dr. J. So now I'm Dr. Jacqui. I'm honored to be here and learn alongside you too. Thank you. Okay, you can end. Thank you, Gina.